For 3,000 years, the galaxy had told the same story. It was taught in academies, whispered to hatchlings, recorded in archives that no one questioned anymore. It was a lesson, a warning, a comforting reminder of how the universe worked. Some species rose, some species fell, and some destroyed themselves before anyone else had to. Humans belonged to the last category. Ambassador Kthra of the Salvani Collective believed that story as deeply as she believed in gravity. The great hall of the Galactic Concord shimmered with calm authority. Thousands of crystalline lights floated overhead, casting soft blue reflections across delegates from 17 dominant species. Laughter echoed. Trade agreements were being finalized. Minor border disputes were being resolved with polite words and ceremonial gestures. Peace reigned. 3,000 uninterrupted years of it. We have done well, High Commander Vorsh of Mordhani Empire said beside her, his armored frame towering above most beings in the hall. 17 species. One alliance. No real threats left in the galaxy. Kthra inclined her head politely. Peace is fragile. It survives only because we remember why it matters. Vorsh made a rumbling sound that passed for amusement. History again. You Salvani cling to ghosts. Her 4 eyes scanned the hall. Every species here had once been violent, once reckless, once dangerous. All of them had learned restraint. All except one. The humans, Kthra said softly, more to herself than to Vorsh. He waved a heavy claw dismissively. Extinct. A tragic footnote. They burned their own world with nuclear fire and vanished. A perfect example of why uncontrolled species do not last. Kthra did not reply, because she remembered a different version of the story. Her grandmother had told it to her during long nights under the Salvani sky. Never officially, never from records. Humans were fast. Her grandmother had whispered, too fast. They loved fiercely. They hated fiercely. And they advanced faster than the galaxy was comfortable with. But legends were not evidence. And evidence said the humans were gone. So Kthra smiled, returned to the assembly, and allowed herself to believe the galaxy was safe, far from the Great Hall, beyond trade lanes and diplomatic corridors. A Salvani research station drifted in orbit around a dead star. It was a forgotten place. That was why Rilken worked there. He was not interested in new discoveries. New discoveries brought attention, politics, oversight. Rilken preferred old data, damaged archives, corrupted logs, abandoned observation reports that no one else bothered to restore. The past did not argue back. Until tonight. A corrupted file flickered on his screen, refusing to delete itself. Saul, 3 observation report. Final. Rilken froze. Saul, 3. The old designation for Earth. His hearts beat faster as he began repairing the data line by line, pulling fragments from decay. Day 1247 of observation. Human technological acceleration exceeds all projections. Rilken frowned. That was early space-age humanity. He scrolled. Day 1312. Humans have detected our observation station. Method unknown. Impossible. Salvani stealth technology at that time had been centuries ahead. Another line restored itself. They are transmitting mathematical sequences. They are attempting communication. Rilken swallowed. Contact had never been made. That was official history. The file continued. Council decision. No response. Humans deemed unstable. Probability of self-annihilation exceeds 92%. That part he recognized. Then came the section everyone quoted. Day 1521. Human global conflict has escalated. Nuclear weapons deployed. Atmospheric collapse imminent. Rilken exhaled slowly. The lesson, the cautionary tale. But the data did not end there. Day 1534. Unexpected event detected. His claws tightened. 47 human vessels have launched from Earth. FDL signature unknown. Destination, deep extragalactic void. Rilken stared. 47. He had been taught that no one escaped. Day 1535. Final entry. Earth is dead. However, not all humans perish with their world. The words felt heavier than gravity. Council assessment. Survivors pose no threat. Resources insufficient. They will perish in darkness. Rilken leaned back, trembling, for 1,000 years. For 1,000 years of believing a lie built on an assumption. They will perish. He stared at the screen. What if they didn't? He whispered. 3 days later, a deep space probe vanished near the Carina dwarf galaxy. No explosion. No distress signal. Just silence. Rilken pulled the final transmission. The image was blurred, distorted by gravitational interference. But the shape was unmistakable. A ship, larger than anything the Conquered had ever built. Its hull did not reflect light. It absorbed it, and on its surface, a symbol, a blue circle, green and brown markings. Rilken cross-referenced ancient human cultural data. His blood went cold. That's Earth, he breathed. 2 more probes vanished. Then a science vessel. Then a military scout. Rilken didn't sleep. He went straight to Ambassador Kthra. When Kthra saw the image, the Great Hall felt very far away. Impossible, she said automatically. Rilken shook his head. The data is consistent. Whatever destroyed our probes did so without detectable energy discharge. No debris, no weapon signature we understand. Kthra's grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Humans never forgot a wrong. If they survived, Kthra said slowly, they have had for 1,000 years. Rilken nodded. For 1,000 years to remember. The emergency council convened in silence. Gone were the glowing crystals, the laughter, the confidence. High Commander Vor stood before the assembly, his voice no longer amused. We have confirmation, he announced. Unknown vessels of immense size detected. Human origin confirmed. The hall erupted. They are extinct. This must be a trap. Preemptive action now. Kthra remained seated, because she understood something the others did not. The humans had not attacked. They had not threatened. They had not spoken. They had simply appeared. And that frightened her more than any declaration of war. A final transmission interrupted the chaos. One signal, broadcast on all frequencies, translated instantly. The voice was calm, controlled. Human, you forgot about us, it said. A pause. That was a mistake. The hall fell into absolute silence. Kthra closed her eyes. The humans were no longer a myth. They were no longer a lesson. They were real. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy realized something terrifying. The cautionary tale had survived, and it remembered everything. The emergency session ended without resolution. That alone terrified Ambassador Kthra more than a human message. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Conqueror had always decided something. Even wars were decided cleanly. Votes cast. Fleets mobilized. Outcomes predicted with comfortable certainty. This time, no one knew what to vote for. The words still echoed in her mind. You forgot about us. That was a mistake. Not a threat. Not a demand. An accusation. Kthra returned to her private quarters, feeling older than she had that morning. The polished walls, the diplomatic insignias, the soft ambient light. None of it brought comfort now. The galaxy she had trusted suddenly felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Rilken was already waiting. He stood stiffly near the wall, datapad clutched in all 4 hands, his silver skin dull with exhaustion. He had not slept either. You were right, Kthra said quietly. Rilken did not pretend to misunderstand. About the humans? Yes. She activated the privacy field. No recordings. No observers. No history rewritten later. Show me everything, she said. Rilken hesitated. Ambassador, once you see the full archive, you will not be able to unsee it. Kthra met his gaze. Then show me. The projection filled the room. Not a single report, but thousands. Observation logs. Censored data. Abandoned reconnaissance files scattered across millennia. All marked with the same quiet classification that discouraged curiosity. NON priority. Closed. The first realization struck her immediately. We didn't just watch Earth, Kthra whispered. Rilken nodded. We followed them. Images shifted. Human colonies, early orbital stations, primitive interplanetary craft. They didn't destroy themselves overnight. he continued. The war was devastating, yes, but it wasn't the end. It was the last stage of something much longer. Thra watched as timelines overlapped. Human conflicts. Human cooperation. Wars followed by treaties. Cities rebuilt again and again. They were learning, she said slowly. Yes, Rilken replied. Painfully. Repeatedly. The next file loaded. Project Exodus. Human evacuation tracking. Thra froze. Evacuation? She asked. 47 ships were what we confirmed, Rilken said. But that was only what passed through our limited observation window. He expanded the data. Dozens of faint trajectories appeared, blurred, unstable, deliberately masked. They scattered, Thra realized. They didn't flee together. Exactly. A survival strategy. Fragmentation. Redundancy. A shiver ran through her. That's advanced thinking, she murmured. It is when your species understands extinction, Rilken said softly. Hours passed. Thra sat silently as Rilken guided her through the hidden truth. The conquered had not ignored the humans because they were weak. They had ignored them because they were unpredictable. There were internal debates, Rilken said, pulling up council transcripts. Some elders argued for contact, aid, intervention. Thra read the highlighted conclusion. Risk assessment. Humans display extreme emotional variance. Rapid innovation under stress. High probability of surpassing containment thresholds. Containment. They'd fear humans not as enemies, but as rivals. They thought humans would either destroy themselves, Thra said, or become something uncontrollable. Yes. So they chose the easier outcome, she finished bitterly. They waited. Rilken did not argue. A new alert chimed. Both of them turned toward the datapad. Rilken's eyes widened. Another loss? Thra asked. Worse, he said. He projected the incoming data. A military listening array near the Carina dwarf galaxy had not gone silent. It had reported something. A single frame. A wide field capture. The image stole Thra's breath. Space itself appeared distorted. Bent, folded, reshaped like fabric pulled too tight. And emerging from that distortion, a fleet, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. Ships arranged with impossible precision. No wasted space. No chaotic formation. Each vessel placed with deliberate intent. Like pieces on a board only one side understood. These are not explorers, Thra whispered. Rilken shook his head slowly. No. The data continued. No weapon discharge detected. No aggressive maneuvers. Sensors overridden without damage. They didn't destroy the array, Thra said. They silenced it, Rilken replied. Cleanly, reversibly. Thra felt a chill spread through her chest. They wanted us blind, but not broken. Yes. Why? Rilken did not answer, because they both already knew. The council reconvened within the hour. This time, fear was no longer whispered. It filled the hall openly. They are probing our borders. They're testing us. This is an invasion in slow motion. High Commander Vorsh slammed his armored fist against the platform. Enough speculation. We respond with strength. We mobilize. We show them the galaxy is not undefended. Thra stood. It was not planned. It simply happened. They have not attacked, she said clearly. 17 species turned toward her. They have not fired. They have not demanded tribute. They have not claimed territory. They have not destroyed a single world. Vorsh snarled. That does not mean they won't. No, Thra agreed. But it means they could have and chose not to. The hall fell quieter. We abandoned them, she continued. We watched their world die. We recorded their extinction and moved on. Murmurs spread. And now, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of it, they have returned with a fleet capable of erasing us, and their first act was not violence. Vorsh's eyes narrowed. You suggest diplomacy? I suggest we stop assuming, Thra replied, that we are still the most powerful beings in this room. Silence. Then a technician shouted from the sensor dais. Counselors, new signal. The hall darkened. A projection expanded across the chamber. A single human ship, closer now, vast, silent, No weapons charging. No shield flaring. Just presence. The same voice echoed through the chamber once more. Calm, measured, patient. We are not here to conquer, it said. A pause long enough to let hope form. We are here because you decided we were already dead. Kthra felt something in her chest break. This is your chance, the voice continued, to choose differently. The signal ended. No threats. No countdown. Just an offer hanging in the void. Vorsh turned slowly, looking around the hall. They're stalling, he growled. Buying time. Or giving us some, Kthra said quietly. She looked up at the dim crystals, at the symbols of an alliance built on caution and fear. For the first time, she said, we are not being tested by war. She met Vorsh's gaze. We are being tested by memory. Far beyond the hall, beyond sensors and politics and panic, the human fleet waited, not advancing, not retreating, watching to see whether the galaxy would repeat its oldest mistake, or finally acknowledge the species it had left for dead. Commander Yalvith had faced supernovas without flinching. She had navigated gravity storms that crushed lesser ships like insects. She had stared down pirates, anomalies, and things that did not belong in normal space. For 2 centuries of service in the 3rd Exploratory Fleet of the Galactic Conquered, fear had been an abstract concept, useful for training simulations, irrelevant in practice. Until now, her flagship, Vigilance, drifted at the edge of the Carina dwarf galaxy alongside 7 other conquered vessels. They had been sent not to engage, but to observe, to verify what the Council still hoped might be sensor error or exaggeration. Yalvith already knew better. Bring the long-range array to maximum resolution, she ordered. The bridge hummed softly as systems strained beyond their usual limits. The main display adjusted, compensating for gravitational distortion, filtering out cosmic noise, and then the image sharpened. The bridge went silent. The human ships were closer than the Council projections had suggested. Much closer. They were not arranged in the loose, adaptable formations common to conquered doctrine. There was no visible flexibility, no allowance for retreat or improvisation. Instead, the fleet was precise. Rows upon rows of vessels hung in space with geometric perfection, each ship separated by identical distances, aligned along vectors that suggested pre-calculated firing solutions, despite the fact that no weapons were active. How many? Yalvith asked quietly. Her sensor officer swallowed. I'm still counting, Commander. Estimate. At least 12,000 confirmed hulls, he said, his voice tight. And that's only within our current sensor envelope. 12,000. Yalvith felt her secondary heart skip a beat. The combined military strength of the conquered, 17 species united, numbered roughly 15,000 active warships. And those ships varied wildly in age, design philosophy, and combat effectiveness. These human vessels did not. They were uniform in intent, not identical, far from it, but unified. Some were massive, dwarfing the Vigilance by orders of magnitude. Others were smaller, sleeker, built for speed rather than presence. All of them shared one trait that unsettled Yalvith deeply. They absorb light. It's not stealth, her weapons officer murmured, staring at the readings. It's something else. Their hulls aren't reflecting or bending photons. They're consuming them. Yalvith leaned forward. Meaning our passive sensors can barely register them, and our active scans are being redirected. Redirected. Not blocked. Not jammed. Redirected. They're allowing us to see only what they want us to see, Yalvith said. No one disagreed. A junior officer broke the silence. Commander, we're being scanned. Yalvith nodded once. Of course we are. She studied the display again. The human fleet was not maneuvering, not adjusting posture, not responding to their presence at all, as if the conquered ships were irrelevant. That realization stung. Open a general communication channel, she ordered. Her crew looked at her in surprise, but obeyed. All frequencies, Yalvith continued. Broadcast diplomatic identification codes. The channel opened. Yalvith took a slow breath. Unknown vessels, she began, forcing steadiness into her voice. This is Commander Yalvith of the 3rd Fleet of the Galactic Conquered. We come in peace. We request dialogue. Silence. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The human fleet did not move. No response came. Yalvith felt sweat bead beneath her armor plates. Had they even noticed her transmission? Just as doubt began to creep in, her comms officer stiffened. Commander, incoming signal. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the transmission overrode local systems, not forcibly, but effortlessly. The voice that filled the bridge was not loud. It did not need to be. It was clear, calm, controlled. Human, you are heard, the voice said. Yalvith exhaled slowly. We acknowledge your presence, she replied. We seek understanding. Your arrival has caused concern. A pause. Concern is appropriate, the voice answered. Yalvith bristled, but held her tongue. You enter conquered adjacent space without prior contact, she said carefully. We ask your intentions. Another pause, longer this time. When the human spoke again, the tone had not changed, but something beneath it had. We did not enter your space, the voice said. We returned to ours. The words struck harder than any weapon. Yalvith's claws tightened against her command chair. This region has been under conquered observation for millennia, she countered. Yes, the human replied. We are aware. A chill ran through the bridge. You monitored us, the voice continued. You cataloged our extinction. You recorded our failure. Yalvith felt something cold settle in her core. And you decided we were finished. The transmission cut. No farewell. No threat. Just truth. Within minutes, emergency priority orders arrived from the Council. Maintain position. Do not engage. Continue observation. Yalvith almost laughed. Observation. As if that was still an equal exchange. Commander, her tactical officer said hesitantly, they're moving. Yalvith's head snapped back to the display. The human fleet was reconfiguring. Not advancing, not retreating. Ships shifted with smooth, synchronized motion, rotating into new alignments that made her instincts scream. They're not preparing attack, the officer said slowly. Then what are they doing? Yalvith asked. The answer came from the sensors. They're making room. Space rippled, not exploded, not torn, folded. Reality bent inward, as if space itself had been instructed to step aside, and something began to emerge. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence as a new object fully materialized. Calling it a ship felt inadequate. It was a structure, vast beyond comprehension. Larger than moons some of Yalvith's people had colonized. Its surface was dark, layered, complex in ways her mind struggled to interpret. Weapon signatures bloomed across its hull. Not charging. Waiting. What is that? Someone whispered. Yalvith's voice came out hoarse. A message, she said. The human transmission resumed. This is one of our custodial vessels, the voice explained. Designed for preservation. Deterrence. Memory. Memory. Yalvith swallowed. You built this in exile? She asked. Yes. How long did it take? Another pause. Longer than your empire has existed. The implication hit her like a physical blow. This was not a desperate civilization lashing out. This was a patient one. A species that had survived annihilation, learned restraint, and then spent thousands of years preparing. For what? Yalvith asked quietly. For the moment we would be forced to speak again, the human replied. The massive structure held position. The fleet stabilized. Everything stopped. Yalvith realized then that this was not an invasion. It was a demonstration, a controlled one. They were showing the conquered what they had become, without firing a single shot. Commander, her sensor officer said softly, if they wanted us gone, we would already be gone. Yalvith nodded. She opened a secure channel to the Council. Report, a voice demanded. Yalvith chose her words carefully. The humans are not testing our defenses, she said. They are testing our judgment. Silence followed. Then she added the words she never thought she would speak. And whatever decision we make next, they are prepared for it. Far beyond her ship, the human fleet held steady, not advancing, not retreating, waiting to see whether the galaxy would finally understand what it meant to awaken a species that had survived extinction and learn patience in the dark. The silence after the transmission was worse than panic. Commander Yalvith had expected orders, mobilization, withdrawal, something decisive. Instead, the council chambers across 17 worlds fell into stunned stillness, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Conqueror did not know how to respond. On the bridge of the Vigilance, officers spoke only in whispers. Displays showed the same impossible image. The human fleet, perfectly still. The colossal custodial vessel hanging in folded space like a judgment-given form. No weapons charging. No shields flaring. No aggression. Just presence. "Commander," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving simultaneous council summons. Priority absolute." Yalvith nodded. "Patch them through. All of them." The bridge lights dimmed as the central hollow emitter activated. One by one, the faces of the conquered appeared. Ambassadors, admirals, elders, warlords. 17 species, united by fear instead of confidence. Ambassador Thra was there. Yalvith focused on her immediately. Of all the counselors, Thra was the only one who looked prepared. Not calm, but resolved. "Report," demanded High Commander Vorsh, his armored face rigid with controlled fury. "What is the situation?" Yalvith did not embellish. "They outnumber us," she said. "They outclass us. Their technology is centuries, perhaps millennia, beyond ours. They have demonstrated absolute control of local space-time." Murmurs erupted. "They have not attacked," Yalvith continued. "They have not threatened. But they are making one thing clear. And that is," Vorsh pressed, "that they remember." The chamber fell silent. The human fleet had not advanced further. Instead, something else began to happen. Across conquered space, dormant arrays activated, not by command, but by intrusion. Listening posts, scientific probes, navigation beacons. Systems that had been untouched for centuries suddenly came alive. Then each one transmitted the same signal. A message, not encrypted, not hidden, not targeted, broadcast everywhere. On trade worlds, on frontier colonies, on home worlds where children had never heard the word human spoken aloud. The signal cut through entertainment feeds, navigational traffic, even military command channels. The galaxy stopped. The image that appeared was simple. A single human figure, not armored, not seated on a throne, no weapons visible, just a person, standing in a darkened room, face illuminated softly from the front. Behind them, stars. "I am not your enemy," the human said. The translator struggled for a fraction of a second, then stabilized. "My name is irrelevant," the human continued. "I speak for those you recorded as extinct." Thra felt her breath catch. "You watched our world burn," the human said. "You cataloged our suffering. You concluded that we would not endure." Images appeared beside the speaker. Earth before. Earth during the fire. Earth after. "We did not die," the human said quietly. Another image. A convoy of battered ships fleeing a dying star. 47 vessels. "We left," the voice continued, "not to escape consequence. To preserve possibility." The feed shifted again. Generations of humans living in confined habitats. Children born under artificial skies. Graves carved into steel decks. Faces growing older beneath borrowed suns. "For 4,000 years," the human said, "we survived in darkness. We built. We learned. We remembered." The speaker leaned forward slightly. "And we wondered when you would remember us." Across the galaxy, no one spoke. On the Morthani throne world, High Commander Vorsh watched the transmission with barely restrained rage. "They accuse us," he snarled. "They rewrite history." "They show history," corrected one of his advisors softly. Vorsh rounded on them. "We owe them nothing. Their war destroyed them, not us." The advisor hesitated. "We observed. We chose not to intervene. We were not obligated to." "You judge them," the advisor interrupted, then flinched. "Forgive me, Commander, but we did." Vorsh turned back to the display. The human speaker continued. "We are not here for conquest," they said. "If we were, you would already be silent. That line spread through military analysis channels like poison. Truth had weight. We are here, the human finished. Because extinction is not the same as forgetting, and forgetting has consequences. The transmission ended. Everywhere at once. The aftermath was chaos. Some worlds erupted in protests, fear-driven, desperate. Others demanded immediate militarization. A few fringe species called for surrender before demands were even made. On the Council Channel, voices overlapped. This is intimidation. This is blackmail. This is a declaration of war. Ambassador Thra rose slowly. It is none of those, she said. The chamber quieted unwillingly. It is a reminder, she continued. And we should ask ourselves why a species with the power to erase us chose instead to speak. Vor scoffed. Because they are weak. Yalvatha's voice cut, and before Thra could respond. No, she said flatly. Because they are disciplined. That got attention. They demonstrated control over space-time. Yalvath continued. They silenced our arrays without damage. They exposed our defenses without exploiting them. That is not weakness. She paused. That is restraint. The word settled heavily. Thra nodded. They are showing us the version of themselves they choose to be. And if that choice changes, Vorsh demanded, then we will face the consequences of our next action. Thra replied. A new alert flashed across the council display. Another transmission. Shorter this time. No images. No history lesson. Just text. We will not advance. We will not retreat. The next move is yours. The implication was clear. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Conquered was not dictating terms. They were being asked to decide. Yalvath felt a strange sense of unreality wash over her. All her training, all her doctrines, none of them addressed the scenario. Not invasion, not diplomacy, not extinction. Choice. Commander, her first officer whispered, if they attack, they won't, Yalvath said quietly. How can you be sure? Yalvath watched the unmoving human fleet. Because they've waited for 1,000 years, she answered. They are not in a hurry. On the council channel, Vorsh's voice hardened. We must strike first, he said, before they decide to stop talking. Thra closed her eyes for a brief moment. She saw her grandmother's face in memory. Humans do not forget a wrong. She opened her eyes. And what? She asked softly. If this is the moment that decides what they remember next? Silence followed. Across the void, the human fleet remained still, watching, not for weakness, but for wisdom. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the galaxy realized the truth too late to be comforting. This was not the beginning of a war. It was the end of an era where mistakes could be ignored. The council adjourned without consensus. Again, Ambassador Thra remained seated long after the others vanished from the hollow field. The chamber felt colder now, emptier, its ancient authority exposed as little more than tradition layered over fear. Humans had done that, without firing a single weapon. She returned to her quarters with a single question burning in her mind, one she had avoided since Rilken first showed her the archives. Why didn't they die? Every model the Conquered had ever built said they should have. Human lifespans were short, their biology inefficient, their societies volatile. They fought among themselves over ideology, territory, identity. Conflicts most spacefaring species evolved beyond before leaving their home worlds. They were chaotic, and chaos did not survive deep time. So why were they here? Rilken answered that question with data. Lots of it. They didn't survive despite who they were, he said, projecting a spiral of timelines across Thra's chamber. They survived because of it. The display showed human population curves overlaid with catastrophe markers. Wars, plagues, environmental collapse, near extinctions. Most species, Rilken continued, collapse when systems fail. Humans rebuild them, faster each time. Thra watched the curves rise again and again. They adapted to disaster, she murmured. They evolved socially instead of biologically, Rilken said. Culture as an engine of survival. The projection shifted. Human innovations bloomed not in eras of peace, but during crisis. Necessity-driven breakthroughs. Improvised solutions. Technologies born from desperation. They compress progress, Rilken explained. What takes us centuries, they do in decades, sometimes less. Kthra felt something tighten in her chest. That makes them dangerous, she said. Yes, Rilken agreed, and unstoppable once they survive long enough. Across conquered space, military analysts came to similar conclusions, and some of them panicked. On the Morthani throne world, High Commander Vor stood before his war council, staring at tactical projections that no longer made sense. They should have collapsed, he growled. Exile alone should have ended them. An admiral spoke hesitantly. Commander, humans evolved under constant threat. Predators, resource scarcity, internal conflict. So did we. Vor snapped. Yes, the admiral said carefully. But we stabilized early. They never did. That silence was telling. They normalized crisis, the admiral continued. To them, survival is a daily act, not a state of peace. Vorsh turned slowly. You're saying they expect catastrophe? Yes, Commander. And prepare for it, another officer added. Vorsh's jaw clenched. Then peace was never an option, he said. The human fleet remained motionless. That disturbed the analysts more than any maneuver. They were not posturing. They were not probing. They were waiting. Commander Yalvith watched them from the bridge of the Vigilance, eyes fixed on the great custodial vessel still hanging in folded space. Commander, her sensor officer said quietly, we've completed a deep spectrum scan of their hull composition. Yalvith turned, and the officer hesitated. It's layered, redundant, adaptive. Each layer responds differently to energy input, meaning, even if we found a way to penetrate one defense, the next would already be changing. Yalvith nodded slowly. They don't build for victory, she said. They build for endurance. Yes, her tactical officer shifted uncomfortably. Commander, I think their fleet doctrine isn't based on winning battles. Yalvith looked at him. I think it's based on surviving losing ones. The implications settled heavily. Ambassador Kthra requested a private channel with the Kethner Elder, the oldest living member of the Conquered. When his image appeared, he looked more tired than she had ever seen him. You have seen it too, Kthra said. Yes, the Elder replied softly. And I have remembered things I hope were forgotten. Why didn't you help them? Kthra asked. Why did none of you? The Elder closed his eyes. Because we recognize ourselves in them, he said. Kthra stiffened. When we were young, the Elder continued, we were like humans, brilliant, violent, unstable. We nearly destroyed ourselves before learning restraint. So you fear they would surpass you. Yes, he admitted. And worse, we fear they will become what we had been without learning the lesson we barely survived. Kthra felt a hollow ache. So you abandoned them. We convinced ourselves it was mercy, the Elder said, that letting them fade was kinder than intervention. And now, Kthra asked, the Elder opened his eyes. Now we see what happens when a species survives its own apocalypse. Across the void, within the human fleet, no alarm sounded. Admiral Helena Vance stood alone on the bridge of the Remembrance, gazing at a projection of Earth, dead, scarred, silent. Status? She asked quietly. Her executive officer, Marcus Chun, replied without hesitation. No aggressive movement. No fleet mobilization beyond localized Morthani sectors. Vance nodded. They're afraid, she said. As expected. Not of us, she corrected. Of what they think will become. Chun hesitated. And what will we become, Admiral? Vance looked at the dead world. That depends on what they choose next. Back on the Vigilance, Yalvith received an encrypted transmission from Conquered Intelligence. Morthani fleet mobilization detected. Full combat readiness. 30 cycles. Yalvith's blood ran cold. She forwarded it to the Council immediately. Ambassador Kthra read the alert in silence. Vorsh was preparing to strike. Preemptive. Decisive. Final. They believe humans are inevitable monsters, Kthra said softly. Rilken nodded. So they intend to kill them before the choice is made. Kthra looked once more at the human fleet on her display. For 1,000 years of exile, For 1,000 years of survival. For 1,000 years of restraint. Why didn't they die? The answer terrified her. Because humans did not give up when they should have. They adapted. They endured. They remembered. And now the galaxy stood at the edge of a truth it was not ready to face. Humans were not dangerous because they were violent. They were dangerous because they had learned how to survive anything, including the moment when someone finally tried to erase them for good. Far away, unseen by conquered sensors, subtle shifts rippled through human formations. Not weapons charging, not shields rising, contingencies aligning, because somewhere in the galaxy, someone was about to prove that the conquered had learned nothing at all. The Mordhani did not announce their decision. They never did. High Commander Vorsh believed announcements were for diplomacy, and diplomacy was weakness disguised as civility. War, he believed, was clarity, and clarity was exactly what he intended to bring to the galaxy. 30 cycles after the first human transmission, the Mordhani war fleets began to move. Thousands of ships disengaged from orbital docks across Mordhani space, their armor hulls reflecting crimson command lights. They formed in vast, aggressive wedges, classic Mordhani doctrine, designed to punch through enemy lines with overwhelming force. Numbers were their advantage. Numbers had always been their advantage. Vorsh stood in the central command chamber, watching the mobilization with grim satisfaction. The humans waited too long, he said. They think restraint makes them superior. An admiral hesitated. Commander, they outclass us technologically. Even our simulations. Simulations assume fear. Vorsh snapped. They assume uncertainty. We will give them neither. The fleet jumped. Commander Yalvith felt it before she saw it. Her sensor screamed the space ruptured in multiple locations. Not the control folding humans use, but raw, violent emergence. Mordhani signatures. Her tactical officer whispered. Thousands of them. Yalvith's claws tightened. They're early, she said. They're not waiting for council authorization. The human fleet remained still. That was what terrified her most. Commander, her comms officer said urgently, we're receiving a Mordhani broadcast. Vorsh's face appeared on the bridge display, his armored features rigid with certainty. Stand aside, Yalvith, he ordered. This is not your concern. The Mordhani Empire will neutralize the human threat. You will start a war you cannot finish, Yalvith replied. Vorsh's eyes burned. There is no war yet, only prevention. The channel cut. Across the void, the Mordhani fleet powered weapons. Plasma arrays flared. Gravitic lances charged. Missile bays opened like metal jaws. Yalvith watched in helpless horror. Signal the humans, she ordered. All frequencies. Her crew obeyed instantly. This is Commander Yalvith of the Galactic Conquered, she said, forcing urgency into her voice. You are about to be attacked. I repeat, about to be attacked. Defensive action advised. There was no immediate response. The Mordhani fired. Space ignited. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously, tearing brilliant scars through the void. Energy storms collided and overlapped. Enough firepower to crack continents and boil oceans. For one brief, desperate moment, Yalvith thought Vorsh might be right. Then the human ships moved. They did not surge forward. They did not scatter. They slid. Reality bent around them, as if space itself had learned where they preferred to be. Beams passed through places the ships had occupied a heartbeat earlier. Missiles curved, then vanished, their guidance systems rewritten mid-flight. What were they doing? Yalvith's weapons officer whispered. They're not dodging, Yalvith said slowly. They're rewriting trajectories. The first human response came not as an explosion, but as absence. A Mordhani cruiser at the edge of the formation simply stopped existing. No debris, no flash, no energy bloom. One moment it was there. The next, the space it occupied was empty. Silence followed. Then another ship vanished. Then another. Panic rippled through the Mordhani lines. Report. Vorsh roared across emergency channels. There, a panicked voice replied, then cut off mid-sentence. The human fleet continued to move. Not chaotically, not aggressively, but with precise, methodical intent. They were correcting the battlefield. Commander, Yalvatha's sensor officer said in awe, "Their weapons aren't targeting hulls. They're targeting probability." Yalvath swallowed. "They're collapsing outcomes," she said, "choosing which version of reality survives." The Morthani fire harder. It didn't matter. Human vessels slipped between moments. Energy bent away. Entire salvos were neutralized before impact, rewritten into harmless radiation. Then the custodial vessel activated. Not fully, just enough. A low-frequency pulse rolled across the battlefield, inaudible, invisible, but devastating. Morthani ships froze. Engines died. Weapons went silent. Command systems locked in recursive loops. "They're disabling us," Yalvath whispered. "Not destroying." Vorsh refused a retreat. "All ships," he roared. "Ramming speed. Break through." Hundreds of Morthani vessels surged forward in a final, desperate charge. The human response was immediate. The custodial vessel spoke. Not in sound, but in space itself. A sphere of folded reality snapped shut around the charging ships. They did not explode. They were compressed, reduced to drifting, powerless fragments caught in a gravity well that would hold them indefinitely. The battle was over. It had lasted less than 12 minutes. Yalvath stared at the aftermath. Thousands of Morthani ships were gone, some erased, most disabled. Escape pods drifted through space, intact. The human fleet had lost nothing, not a single vessel. A human transmission cut through the stunned silence. "We did not want this," the calm voice said. "Remember that." The image shifted, showing Morthani survivors being tractored gently toward human medical vessels. "We warned you," the voice continued. "We waited. You chose." A pause. "Now you will live with that choice." The human fleet reoriented, not toward the retreating Morthani forces, but toward the heart of conquered space, not advancing fast, advancing inevitably. Yalvath closed her eyes. The first alien mistake had been made, and the galaxy would spend centuries understanding what it had cost. Far away, Ambassador Kthra watched the battle recordings in silence. "They didn't retaliate," Rilken whispered. "They restrained." Kthra nodded. "They weren't proving strength," she said. She looked at the frozen image of human ships moving through fire as if it were rain. They were teaching a lesson. And the lesson was unmistakable. The humans had not returned to fight a war. They had returned to end the assumption that the galaxy could decide their fate without consequence. The wreckage field drifted in silence. Commander Yalvath had seen battlefields before. Burning hulls, screaming calms, chaotic retreats. This was different. The void was clean. Too clean. Morthani ships lay powerless, intact but broken, frozen in geometries that denied momentum and escape. Escape pods drifted gently, already being gathered by human recovery craft. No executions, no pursuit, no victory cries, just control. Yalvath forced herself to breathe. Human recovery vessels are stabilizing Morthani survivors, her medical officer reported. They're providing life support. Of course they are, Yalvath murmured. Across conquered space, the recording spread faster than panic ever had. Analysts replayed the battle frame by frame, trying to isolate the moment where the war turned. There wasn't one. The humans had never been losing. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Helena Vance watched the aftermath without satisfaction. "Status," she said. 78% of Morthani fleet disabled, not destroyed. Marcus Chin replied. "Remaining forces retreating. 0 human casualties." Vance nodded once. "Open a channel to the Conquered Council," she said. Chin hesitated. "Admiral, they may interpret that as escalation." "They already did that themselves," Vance replied calmly. "Now we clarify." The channel opened. 17 faces appeared, some pale, some rigid, some openly terrified. Ambassador Thra was there. Vance met her gaze first. "This ends now," Vance said. "Not a threat, a boundary." "You attacked us," she continued, eyes flicking briefly to the Morthani delegation's empty seat. "We responded, proportionately." Vorsh's replacement, a grim-faced Morthani marshal, leaned forward. "You annihilated our fleet." "No," Vance corrected. "We stopped it." Images appeared beside her. Mort-Hani survivors receiving care. Escape pods docked with human medical ships. We could have erased every vessel. Vance said evenly. We chose not to. The council chamber buzzed. Why? Someone demanded. Vance didn't answer immediately. Instead, she raised a hand. Another image replaced the battlefield. Earth, dead, scarred, silent. This, she said, is why. Silence felt like gravity. We were there when our world burned, Vance continued. We watched it happen, and we remember who watched with us and did nothing. Kthra felt the words strike something deep and painful. But we also remember who we were. Vance said, what we became when fear ruled us. We will not repeat that mistake. The Kethner elder finally spoke, voice heavy with age and regret. What do you want from us, human? Vance met his gaze. Truth, she said, and accountability. The human fleet slowed, not halted, slowed. Yalvuth noticed it immediately. The advance vector softened, widening margins, creating space where none had existed before. They're giving us room, her first officer said quietly. Yes, Yalvuth replied, to decide. Within the council, arguments ignited. They humiliate us. They spared us. This is domination by mercy. Kthra stood. Her voice did not rise. We abandoned them, she said. We judged them. We recorded their extinction and moved on. She looked around the chamber. And now they are asking us to do what we denied them, acknowledge their existence. The Kethner elder inclined his head. And if we do? Vance answered before Kthra could. Then this stops here. A pause. If not, Vance continued, we will keep moving, carefully, patiently, until you no longer have the luxury of pretending we don't exist. The meaning was unmistakable. Not conquest, inevitability. On the Mort-Hani throne world, cities mourned. Not just ships, certainty. For centuries, the Mort-Hani identity had been forged in strength and decisive violence. Now that identity lay exposed, outmatched not by brutality, but by discipline. In a quiet chamber far from the capital, a young Mort-Hani officer stared at the battle footage. They saved our people, he whispered. An older veteran beside him nodded. Yes, they could have ended us. Yes, why didn't they? The veteran closed his eyes. Because they're not trying to win this war. Then what are they doing? The veteran exhaled slowly. They're ending the last one. Ambassador Kthra requested a private channel. Vance accepted. For a moment, neither spoke. Your restraint, Kthra said finally, has shaken the conquered more than any threat. Vance nodded. Good. You're forcing us to confront our past. Yes. And if we cannot? Vance's expression softened, not with pity, but with resolve. Then we will remember that too. Kthra swallowed. What happens now? Vance turned her gaze to Earth's image, still hovering beside them. We go home, she said, to rebuild, to heal, Vance corrected, and to prove something. What? That survival does not require cruelty, Vance said, and power does not require domination. Kthra felt tears burn at the edges of her eyes. You could rule the galaxy, she said. We could, Vance agreed, but then we become exactly what you feared. A quiet moment passed. What do you need from us? Kthra asked. Vance looked back at her. Recognition, she said. Earth is ours. Its system is ours. You will withdraw your stations. Return what you took. Kthra nodded slowly. And in return? Vance's voice was steady. In return, we stop here. The council reconvened. The decision took less time than anyone expected. Perhaps because everyone already knew the truth. The Galactic Conquered formally acknowledged humanity as a surviving civilization. Earth and its system were designated human sovereign territory. All observation stations were ordered dismantled. All archive materials returned. The message went out across the galaxy, not as a celebration, as a correction. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Yalvuth watched the human fleet alter course, away from conquered space, toward the dead blue that had started everything. They're leaving, her first officer said, stunned. Yes, Yalvuth replied. Why does that feel worse? Yalva didn't answer at first, because she understood now. They weren't leaving in defeat. They were leaving with something far more dangerous. Validation. Far ahead, the human fleet formed a protective ring around Earth. Within it, machines the size of cities began their quiet work. Atmospheric processors deployed. Radiation scrubbers activated. Terraforming arrays unfolded like patient hands. Humanity had come back not with rage, but with memory. And as Commander Yalvath watched the dead world begin its long journey back to life, she realized something that would change the galaxy forever. The most terrifying thing about humans was not their weapons. It was that after 4,000 years of exile, they still believed in a future worth building. The first rain fell on Earth after 4,000 years. It was not a storm, not thunder, not spectacle, just water. Thin clouds, seeded carefully by atmospheric processors, released a gentle drizzle over a scarred continent that had forgotten what rain felt like. From orbit, it looked insignificant. From history, it was everything. Ambassador Kthra stood inside the observation dome of the human restoration vessel Genesis Tide. Below her, Earth's surface shifted slowly beneath transparent shields and drifting machines. Green had not returned yet, but gray had softened. Phase 1 atmospheric detoxification at 8% efficiency, a human technician reported. Radiation levels dropping steadily. Kthra watched silently. "You're doing this knowing none of you will see it finished," she said. Captain Alina Torres, standing beside her, nodded. "Of course. That does not seem logical." Torres smiled faintly. "We don't build for ourselves." She gestured to a holographic projection. Trees, oceans, cities that did not yet exist. We build for people who aren't born yet. Kthra felt something tighten in her chest. Among the conquered, legacy was monuments. Among humans, legacy was patience. Far from Earth, the shock wave spread. The galactic conquered had survived, but it had not escaped unscathed. Trust fractured, old assumptions collapsed, and fear evolved on the Morani throne world. The surviving leadership gathered in a chamber that had once echoed with conquest plans. Now it echoed with doubt. "They spared us," a counselor said bitterly, "and in doing so, stripped us of honor." A younger Morani officer snapped back. "They stripped us of arrogance." The room went silent. Screens replayed the battle again. Human ships weaving through weapons fire, disabling without exterminating, precise to the point of humiliation. "They treated us like children," one general growled. "No," the officer replied quietly. "They treated us like a mistake." That distinction hurt more. Within the conquered council, fractures widened. Some species demanded rapid militarization. Others demanded rapprochement. A few whispered the unthinkable. What if we are no longer the center? The Kethner elder listened to them all, then spoke. "The galaxy has always feared extinction," he said. "We believed ourselves immune. Now we have seen a species walk through extinction and return unchanged in spirit." He looked around the chamber. "That should terrify you." Admiral Helena Vance felt the weight of that terror every hour. On the bridge of the Remembrance, she reviewed reports with quiet precision. Terraforming Phase 1 progressing within projections. Marcus Chin said. Conquer withdrawal nearly complete. No hostile movements detected. And internal sentiment? Vance asked. Chin hesitated. Mix. Some crews wanted more. Of course they did, Vance said softly. She dismissed the displays and turned toward the viewport. Earth hung below, still wounded, but no longer dead. Do you regret it? Chin asked carefully. Vance did not answer immediately. When I was young, she said, I believed justice meant balance. Pain for pain, loss for loss. She folded her hands behind her back. But balance doesn't heal, she continued. It just evens the ruins. Chin nodded slowly. You think mercy will hold? I think mercy is a test, Vance replied. For us, and for them. In the depths of conquered space, that test began almost immediately. A fringe coalition, 3 minor powers terrified by humanity's restraint, authorized a covert operation, not an attack, a theft, Stealth probes slipped toward Earth system, masked behind residual debris from withdrawn stations. Their mission: acquire human terraforming data. If we understand their technology, the planners argued, we can protect ourselves. The probes never reached Earth. They vanished silently, folded out of space before alarms could even register. No retaliation followed. No broadcast. No warning. Just absence. The message was unmistakable. We see everything. Kthra learned of the incident through diplomatic back channels. You didn't respond, she said during her next meeting with Vance. We did, Vance replied, just not publicly. That will frighten them more. Yes, Vance said. It should. Kthra studied the human admiral. You walk a narrow line. We always have. And if they cross it? Vance's eyes hardened, not with anger, but with certainty. Then they will learn the difference between mercy and weakness. Years passed. Not quickly. Deliberately. Terraforming platforms became permanent constellations. Microbial ecosystems stabilized. Water returned. Human children were born who had never known exile, only the promise of return. Across the galaxy, humanity became something unprecedented. Not a conqueror, not a victim, a reference point. When disputes arose, species asked, what would humans do? Sometimes the answer was restraint, sometimes firmness, never cruelty. On a distant conquered world, Commander Yalvith, now retired, watched a public broadcast from Earth. Blue skies, green valleys, life returning slowly. They should hate us, her aide muttered. Yalvith shook her head. They already moved past that. Isn't that worse? Yalvith smiled sadly. Yes, she said, for anyone who hoped fear would keep them predictable. On Earth, the first ocean basin began to fill. It would take centuries, but it had begun. Ambassador Kthra stood beside Torres again, watching artificial moons guide isolating comets into controlled atmospheric burns. Your people remember everything, Kthra said. Yes, Torres replied. And yet you chose forgiveness. Torres looked at her. No, she corrected. We chose responsibility. For what? For what we become next. Kthra felt the truth settle heavy and undeniable. Humanity had not returned to claim dominance. They had returned to prove something, to themselves more than anyone else. That power did not excuse cruelty, that survival did not demand hatred, and that the most dangerous force in the galaxy was not a fleet, but a species that remembered its pain and chose to build anyway. Far above Earth, the stars watched in silence, for the first time in millennia, not waiting for war, but wondering what kind of future would grow from mercy strong enough to hold the line. The galaxy adjusted, slowly, uneasily, and not everyone accepted what humanity had become. 5 years after the first rain fell on Earth, the Galactic Conquered met again in the Great Hall. The crystals glowed brighter now, newly recalibrated. Symbolic, some said, of transparency. Others called it cosmetic. Ambassador Kthra stood at her usual place. Older now, lines of thought etched deeper into her silver skin. She had seen too much to believe symbols alone could heal history. Around her, delegates whispered, not about humans arriving, but about humans waiting. They haven't expanded. They haven't demanded tribute. They haven't militarized borders. Why? Someone finally asked aloud. The question echoed louder than any accusation ever had. In a private chamber adjoining the hall, the Kethner elders sat with representatives from 6 major species, including Kthra. We have watched them for 5 years, the elder said. They restore a dead world. They return artifacts. They accept observers. They intervene only when provoked. He looked around slowly. This behavior does not fit any known strategic model. A Morani delegate clenched his fists. No empire restrains itself after proving superiority. Perhaps, Kthra said quietly. They are not trying to be an empire. Silence followed. That may be the most dangerous possibility of all, the elder replied. On Earth, Admiral Helena Vance received the Conquered's formal request. They wanted answers, not treaties, not technology. Truth. Prepare a delegation, she ordered. Limited, civilian-led. Marcus can raise an eyebrow. You're going yourself. Yes, you're still their idea of consequences. Vance smiled faintly. Then it's time they saw something else. The human delegation arrived without escort fleets. One ship, unarmed. Its arrival shook the Concord more than the Armada ever had. In the Great Hall, Vance stood alone at the center. No weapons, no guards. Just a human, gray-haired, calm, unafraid. You asked why, she said, before anyone else could speak. So I'll answer. The hall stilled. We didn't come back to punish you, Vance continued. And we didn't come back to forgive you either. A ripple of confusion moved through the delegates. We came back, she said, because we were unfinished. Kthra felt her breath catch. When Earth burned, humanity fractured, Vance said. Some of us wanted vengeance. Some wanted isolation. Some wanted to forget. She lifted her chin slightly. We chose memory instead. A projection appeared. Human history, not warships, not weapons. Children studying Earth's lost oceans. Families preserving art, language, music. Engineers designing ships they would never fly. Teachers teaching history that hurt. For 4,000 years, Vance said, we asked ourselves a single question. She paused. What kind of species survives this? The hall remained silent. We realized something, she continued. Survival isn't just endurance. It's direction. She met the Morani delegate's gaze. Anyone can survive by becoming cruel. She turned to the Kethner. Anyone can protect themselves by dominating others. Then she looked at Kthra. But not everyone can survive without losing themselves. A younger delegate finally spoke. And if we had attacked again? Vance answered instantly. Then you would not be here. The honesty hit harder than any threat. But that was not the path we hoped you'd choose, Vance said, because we already know where that path ends. She gestured toward Earth's image, half green now, half scarred. We lived it. After the session, Kthra requested a private meeting. They walked together through a quiet corridor overlooking the stars. You frightened them, Kthra admitted. Yes, Vance said, but not because of your weapons. Vance stopped. Because they cannot predict us? No, Kthra said slowly. Because they see themselves reflected in who you refuse to become. Vance nodded. That's the question they don't want to face, she said. If we could choose differently, why didn't they? Kthra felt the weight of centuries pressed down on her. And if the galaxy fails that test? Vance looked out into the void. Then humanity will still pass ours. The fear didn't disappear. It transformed. Some species began reforming governance, afraid of being judged by a standard they hadn't chosen. Others doubled down on secrecy. A few, quietly, began teaching their children about Earth, not as a warning, but as an example. Years later, a Concord research team visited Earth's first restored forest. Trees swayed under a blue sky that had once been poison. One alien scientist touched a leaf, trembling. You rebuilt this knowing it might all be taken again, he said. A human guide shook her head. No, she replied. We rebuilt it knowing it might not be. In orbit, Admiral Vance prepared to retire. Her final log entry was brief. Power is not proven by what you can destroy. It is proven by what you refuse to. She transmitted it to Earth's archives. And to the Concord, far across the galaxy, an ancient species monitoring the rise and fall of civilizations updated its records. Entry added. Humanity. Status. Active. Classification. Unresolved. Threat level. Variable. Anomaly. Chooses restraint after dominance. The archivist paused. No precedent existed. Back on Earth, the first true ocean reflected starlight. Children born under that sky would never know exile. They would inherit something stranger than revenge. They would inherit a choice. And the galaxy, watching quietly now, understood something at last. Humanity was not asking to be feared. They were asking a question, one the universe could no longer ignore. The warning did not come from the Galactic Concord. It came from the dark, beyond mapped space, past even the regions humanity had crossed during exile. Something ancient shifted. Long dormant sensors, relics older than most civilizations, registered an anomaly that defied classification. Stars dimmed, gravity bent. Signals screamed, then went silent. The observers called it the silence event. No ships were seen. No weapons fired. Entire systems simply stopped responding. The news reached Earth 3 days later. Admiral Helena Vance, days away from formal retirement, stood once more on the bridge of the Remembrance. "Report," she said. "6 systems gone dark," Marcuston replied. "No debris, no radiation, no survivors. It's not an attack pattern we recognize." "Who controls those systems?" Vance asked. Chin hesitated. "Conquered territory, civilian populations, mixed species." Vance closed her eyes briefly. "So," she said, "it begins." The Conquered panicked. Emergency sessions collapsed into shouting. Fleets mobilized without coordination. Some worlds sealed themselves off. Others broadcast pleas. Some to humanity, some to anyone listening. Ambassador Kthra watched it unravel in real time. "They're asking you to intervene," she said during the emergency link with Vance. "Some of them still hate you, but they're afraid of this more." Vance nodded, as they should be. "What is it?" Kthra asked. "We don't know," Vance replied. "And that's worse." Human deep space archives were opened, records from exile, from the crossing, from the places no one else had ever gone, and there, buried in redacted files and half-forgotten warnings, humanity found something that hoped was only theory, an intelligence older than galactic civilization, a system-level predator, not a species, a filter. It did not conquer. It reset. "They called the null continuum," Chin said quietly as the data assembled. Vance read in silence. "Civilizations that reached a certain threshold, energy density, spatial manipulation, galactic coordination, were erased, not punished, removed. The galaxy isn't afraid of us," Chin said. "It's afraid of what comes after us." Vance looked at Earth's image, alive now, vibrant. "And now," she said softly, "we've rung the bell. The Conquered demanded action. Deploy your fleet. You're the only ones who can fight this. This is your responsibility." Vance listened. Then she spoke. "No." The chamber froze. "We will not charge blindly at something we do not understand," she continued. "That's how civilizations die." "But millions are already dead," someone shouted. "And billions more will die if we repeat the same mistake," Vance replied calmly. She looked directly at Kthra. "This is a final test," she said. "Not of strength, but of wisdom. Human scientists work relentlessly, not on weapons, on communication, on pattern recognition, on understanding why the null continuum erased civilizations instead of simply feeding or expanding. The answer terrified them. It wasn't hostile. It was corrective. Civilizations that spread too fast destabilized space-time itself. The null continuum wasn't a god. It was a janitor. "We're triggering cosmic decay," Chin said, tearing the fabric too aggressively. Vance exhaled slowly. "So the galaxy didn't survive because it was peaceful," she said. "It survived because it was slow." "Yes. And humanity? We survived because we learned patience in exile." Silence followed, then realization. Vance called an emergency address, not just to the Conquered, but to every listening species. Her face appeared across 1,000 worlds. "We know what's happening now," she said, "and we know why." She explained. "No panic, no dramatics, just truth. The universe has limits," she said, "and when civilizations ignore them, something intervenes." "So, what do we do?" someone demanded. Vance's answer shocked them all. "We stop expanding." Outrage erupted. "You want us to shrink? To surrender progress? To kneel to fear?" Vance shook her head. "No," she said. "We want you to choose sustainability over dominance." She paused. "Humanity will lead by example." Orders went out. Human expansion halted. Terraforming slowed. Energy outputs capped. Even Earth's restoration schedule was extended, voluntarily. The Conquered watched in disbelief as the most powerful species in the galaxy restrained itself. "You'd cripple yourselves to save us?" Kthra whispered privately. Vance met her gaze. We learned something in exile, she said. Survival is not about how fast you grow. It's about knowing when to stop. The null continuum paused. For the first time in recorded history, it hesitated. Systems stabilized. The silence event stopped spreading. No explanation came, but the message was clear. The filter had noticed a change. Years passed, then decades. The galaxy adapted. Slower trade lanes, localized civilizations, shared limits. Humanity became something unprecedented, a keystone species, not because of power, because of restraint. On her final day of service, Admiral Van stood beneath Earth's sky, fully blue now, fully alive. You could have ruled everything, Thra said beside her. Van smiled faintly, and lost everything that mattered. She looked up. We weren't meant to conquer the stars, she said. We were meant to learn how to live among them. Far beyond deception, the null continuum adjusted its parameters. Humanity was no longer flagged as a destabilizing anomaly. Instead, a new classification appeared. Stabilizing influence detected. No civilization had ever earned it, and so the galaxy endured. Not because the strongest won, but because one species scarred, exiled, remembered, chose to stop, to heal, to wait, to remain human. The galaxy did not celebrate the end. There was no moment where stars aligned in history declared itself complete. Instead, there was quiet, and in that quiet, something far more rare took root. 1,000 years after the silence event ceased, the galactic conquered no longer resembled the alliance it once had been. Borders still existed, but they mattered less. Expansion still happened, but it was measured. Progress continued, but it asked permission from consequence. At the center of that change was a truth no civilization could ignore. Humanity had chosen restraint when domination was easier. On Earth, the oceans were deep again, not artificial, not borrowed, real. Tides moved under twin moons. Coral reefs bloomed where radiation scars once stretched like open wounds. Forests reclaimed continents slowly, deliberately, guided but never rushed. Children ran beneath trees whose seeds had been carried through exile in cryogenic vaults, protected for 4,000 years by hands that believed they would one day touch soil again. Those hands were dust now, but their faith was alive. In the rebuilt city once called Alexandria, now known simply as home, a museum stood overlooking the sea. Inside, a young alien girl stood beside her human friend, staring up at a simple plaque. No statues, no weapons, no fleets, just words. We left Earth because we refused to become monsters. We returned because we learned how not to be. Is that really all? The alien child asked softly. That's what changed everything. The human boy nodded. That's what my teacher says. That doesn't sound very powerful. The boy smiled. That's what everyone thought at first. Across the galaxy, historians still debated humanity. Some argued they had delayed the inevitable collapse of civilization. Others claimed they had rewritten the rules entirely. But among those who had lived to the turning point, who had watched the strongest fleet in history choose to stop, the answer was simpler. Humanity had done something no empire ever had. They had ended a cycle. Ambassador Thra's journals were studied in academies now. Her words, once personal reflections, had become warnings and guideposts. In her final entry, written near the end of her long life, she had recorded a single thought. We feared humans because we believed power must corrupt. We were wrong. Power reveals. She had written that after walking barefoot through a human forest, feeling soil, feeling life, the Morthani Empire no longer existed. Not destroyed. Transformed. Their fleets were smaller now. Their cities quieter. Their children taught history without glorification. On the anniversary of the battle they had lost, Morthani elders gathered not to mourn defeat, but to remember mercy. A strange ritual, once unthinkable, now foundational. Far beyond known space, the null continuum remained. It did not vanish. It did not speak, but it changed. Its interventions grew rarer. Its thresholds adjusted. In ways no one could fully explain, the universe itself seemed to respond to civilizations that learned when not to take more. Ancient observers, entities older than stars, recorded a quiet anomaly. The galaxy had stabilized without extermination. That had never happened before. Humanity did not claim credit. They never broadcast triumph. They never built monuments to their restraint. Instead, they taught. They shared models, ethics frameworks, historical failures. They reminded every species willing to listen of one lesson learned in exile. Survival, without wisdom, is just delayed extinction. In a classroom overlooking Earth's western ocean, a teacher asked a simple question. Why did humanity conquer the galaxy when they could? A student raised her hand. Because conquest ends, she said, but responsibility continues. The teacher nodded. And why did the galaxy listen? Another student answered. Because humans proved restraint wasn't weakness. It was proof they'd already won the war with themselves. On the anniversary of Earth's full restoration, no parades were held. Instead, people planted trees. Across continents. Across species. Some would grow for centuries. Some would fail. That was accepted because the act itself mattered. High above the planet, the old restoration station still orbited. Now a monument. Now a promise. On its observation deck, a final plaque bore the last recorded words of Admiral Helena Vance, preserved exactly as she had written them. We were not judged by what we destroyed. We were judged by what we refused to destroy. And in that refusal, we found who we truly were. Long after Vance, long after Thra, long after even the memory of exile faded into history, humanity remained, not as rulers, not as saviors, but as a reminder that a species can endure unimaginable loss, carry memory across millennia, return with power beyond comprehension, and still choose to be kind, still choose to build, still choose to stop. And that choice, quiet, uncelebrated, unwavering, outlived empires, outlasted fear, and reshaped the fate of the stars.